Yeah, a few days ago, I had this very deep conversation with a friend of mine about power situation in Nigeria. I've, I'm one of those who have been very, very interested in listening. I'm not an expert in power, but I've been in very deep, high level conversations around power. I've also had to listen to experts, in and out of the country talk about power. And, we all know nobody, you don't even need to be an expert today if you, oh, expose, how valuable power, electricity is, it's almost like the oil and the engine that drives growth and development, industrialization, all kinds of things, that get an economy working. So we talked about power, and what I deduce is that it looks like so. One time I had this opportunity when we were in government and we were trying to see that geometric in our work, a lot of effort. I was very deeply involved in a lot of those engagements, conversations from China to South Africa to Egypt to America. I was involved in all the meetings. In fact, the day Professor Bath Naji received the check from AfriExim, $50 million. So, yeah, thereabout. I was in the room actually. In fact, today one of the things I regret is that I didn't join the photograph because when Professor Orama called the then governor of Abia, Okezie Ikpeazu, to join, with very, very beautiful remarks, about all that effort that culminated to that day. We were just kind of felt somehow. So it was in China that somebody, we went to talk to some investor. This guy had the highest, the biggest, you know, uh, garment manufacturing factory in China. Even when President Buhari visited China, he hosted President Buhari. So this guy is large. Once we went to China, he offered our delegation a private jet to fly us around several of his facilities. So yeah, is a very solid person, right? So I think it's Rui. So the first question the man asked is, can you guys tell us about what you're doing to resolve the power situation in your states, not just in Nigeria? And of course, people who are trying to promote their state and investment, we had all our rhetorics, and the man was just looking at us. And I sensed that the man felt, well, these guys are just telling me something that I need to hear. And the man took time, his team, they took time and explained to us that they know our situation better than we were saying it. Not that better than we know it. Maybe we were just trying to paint a beautiful picture, right? They have taken time over 2 years, being in Nigeria with their experts, understudied our system and all everything, and they were saying, guys, garment factory, that's the kind of manufacturing that they do, cannot work in a place where they are not guaranteed 247 power supply permanently. It's not like, and so the man tried to explain to us that if you lose power in their kind of facility for 1 minute, you're looking at something, a loss in the neighborhood that runs into hundreds of millions of dollars, right? So then we sat down and said, okay, we need to listen to these guys. And by the time they took us through, in fact, that day, uh, I was asked to call Professor Bat Naji with my phone. And I called him, put the phone on speaker, and we had a whole lot of conversation. They were asking technical questions. He was responding. Prof is solid, solid. I wish Nigerian government will allow somebody like Professor Bat Naji the resources, capacity, and the authority to drive the power sector in Nigeria. We will have power if we are serious. So that's I'll come to that. So by the time he explained, the only challenge we had in that from that meeting was that Prof was so emotional about the project that he didn't want to give so much uh, room for any major player to come into his space, right? So he wanted to drive, and of course, I give it to him. It is the man puts his life there, right? So puts his life literally in that project. So why I mentioned that is just to tell you the level of uh, engagement I've had with top experts in energy. So let me leave that and come back. So Nigeria cannot really industrialize without power. And Nigeria cannot have the kind of power that we need without industrialization. So it becomes a chicken and egg thing, right? So one of the things I've written several articles and I said, if anybody comes to government and tell you within 2 years or 4 years, some of you had even said 6 months, you will have uninterrupted power supply, 247 uninterrupted power supply. There are several things that are involved. First is that either the person does not understand the enormity of the challenge and what it means to deliver power in that magnitude and the dynamics of power generation, the economics, the technology, and the mechanism of power generation in its entirety, or that the person knows this, but he just looks at the enormity of the challenge and he doesn't want to face it, so he lies to the people just to believe him, or the person is practically just a very foolish person. For Nigeria to have power, we require a lot of investment, huge, because over the years, we haven't really had deep investment in power. We haven't really made a lot of investments. We may have spent money, we may have, there's been a lot of pro panels, the Siemens, all kinds of $16 billion under Obasanjo. Every government have had to spend a lot of money, on the issue of power, you know, I'm not in those rooms where those conversations and decisions were made. So I can't speak to why they failed or why they didn't succeed. But the fact is that the reality on ground is that we need to make a lot of investments in power. We need to make a lot of investment in sources, generations sources of power. Today, the world has expanded the scope in terms of power sources. So we have all kinds of sources: solar, wind, hydro, or west, and all kinds of things. And government, one of the things I think the government over the years, several governments in a chain of activities have done and achieved is unbundling the power sector, and we can also further unbundle it, really, because that's why it's happening all over the world. You need to just open the space for a lot of players to come in, because that's how you have the critical mass of resources needed to get power to the people. Then uh, then we need to get the right policy framework in place. We need to get the right funding strategy funding structure. So yesterday I was explaining to my friend and I said, basically what we use power to do in Nigeria, in most cities, is to watch movies, charge our phones, and domestic consumption of power. And anybody who knows power and how power financing is structured will tell you that the domestic consumption is not enough to pay for power, right? So that's the point. I may not need to get into details. So we need those, industries, who actually need power to, expand and be functional to pay for power. And then domestic consumption can now be subsidized because if you throw pressure, the financing pressure of power generation, distribution, and transmission on those who use it for who use it domestically, they can't pay for power. That's the truth. And this is one conversation many people are avoiding. Governments avoid, most people in government avoid this conversation about financing structure for power, payment and financing structure. And then, of course, Nigeria, the criminality, the corruption, and the insensitivity and selfishness that get into some of this policy framing, so those who are in businesses that are competing with public power supply will also, because they're also entrenched in government, either directly or indirectly, of course, would like to frustrate every other effort that is being made so that there could be stable power. But one thing Nigeria needs to do is to face squarely the issue of power generation. I've had the opportunity to be in government and I've had ambitions to be in government. And I always tell people, you see, no government, no matter how you praise yourself to high heaven, can solve all the problems within its tenure. No government. Because over the years, a lot of things have been abandoned in Nigeria. A lot of decisions have been taken that are not altruistic, that are not progressive, that are not development minded, right? So many things have gone into the mist in terms of leadership in Nigeria. So things that are, the growth trajectory that Nigeria should have, have been, there have been a lot of zigzag movement around that. So first, so we need a lot of things need to be put in place in terms of framework, in terms of structures and systems. Now begin to build those systems so that they can stand strong and support the kind of vision and the growth and all that. So, like somebody said, we're getting some level of economic stability. Maybe I don't, So I also don't want to get into that debate. So the point is, what I'm saying is, maybe a government can say, for the next 1 year, we are going to devote huge component of our resources to dealing with this issue of power, because it looks like it's something that can have multiplier effects on on many sectors. It could trigger massive growth in different sectors, that will energize the entire economy, entire system, entire livelihood. Because if you move around the world and see what power is doing, the availability of constant uninterrupted power is doing in the lives of people, their livelihood, in industrialization, in education, in all kinds of things. And today we know about the study how AI, which is where the world is now and moving, consumes a lot of power. And you ask yourself, with the level of the wattage that we produce in Nigeria, when we can't even service domestic consumption of power, we can't service industrial power usage. If artificial intelligence gets into the mix, are we going to survive it? Really? So the point is that sometimes I feel that this conversation, this kind of thinking, system design thinking, is what we need within the corridors of power, especially at the national level. There's too much politics going on in Nigeria, too much effort to stay in power, not too much effort to deliver, you know, the benefits of power, essentially. And one of the things, and I end it here, and I say, because I'll do another video, and break down this conversation around power, is that in 1999, we elected President Olusegun Obasanjo. Between 1999 and 2007, President Olusegun Obasanjo was almost the god of Nigeria. You couldn't oppose him and not, bear the brunt. Today, he's running around the whole world, trying to fix some of the things he couldn't fix. He actually suffered third time to be able to fix some things because he realized that, wow, it looks like I didn't focus on what I should have focused on. Then we had President Yaradua. Unfortunately for that gentleman, nice guy, at least he was honest and he showed a lot of integrity in terms of admitting the the kind of election that brought him to power, and some of the things he did, some of his actions show that he's a man who is a man of integrity. But he passed, right? Then we had President Jonathan. Jonathan, they say he's a calm, quiet guy. I don't. I am always very worried when they say somebody is a good man in power. I don't want a good man in power. I want an effective leader, not a good man. You take your goodness to your wife and your kids. Become an effective leader, really. So he's out of the place trying to be a good man, going about delivering speeches. But I think if you ask him in his heart of hearts today, there are many things he would have done right. Then we had President Buhari. Fortunately, he passed, but I'm sure that even the present government is not kind in terms of rhetorics to former President Buhari. Now we have President Tinubu. President Tinubu is somebody that's known as very efficient man, somebody that everybody. I am one of those who have so much confidence in the ability of President Tinubu to reset Nigeria politically, economically, and socially. We're already 3 years down the line. Well, it's a lot of issues. He inherited a lot of issues, but some actions do not show that. It looks like we're still is a motion without really movement, because there are strategic things a leader needs to do to reset the country for massive growth the way we need it. I hope that a lot of attention is being paid. We can do all the whitewashing, beautiful rhetorics, and all kinds of photo ops activities. But remember, like I mentioned, the guys that have passed in office, that have left office, whether you do 4 years or 8 years, by the time you realize it is gone, and you ask yourself, oh, maybe if I had focused on power and we would have gotten it right. Maybe if I have done political restructuring, would have gotten it right. So. Sometimes it's good for leaders to find their purpose, find the mission, and focus on it. You can't do everything. That's the point I want to make. So maybe approaching leadership from that perspective could be very, very. I wrote a book, the Agile Framework in Political Leadership. Is selling on Amazon, where I after extensive research and studies, I I submitted that if we approach governance from project management, the agile framework perspective, maybe we will be more successful as a country at every level. So, what do you think? We need to fix power. It's very important. Is government doing enough, or do they understand the dynamics?